My neighbor showed me his stunning garden. We walked around until he showed me a room with a weird-looking door, but what I saw inside shocked me. I moved into a quiet little neighborhood last year, the kind where everyone waves at each other but keeps to themselves. My next-door neighbor, Mr. Thompson, was the epitome of this vibe, friendly but reserved. He was in his late 60s, lived alone, and had a garden that was the envy of the entire block. Every morning, you'd see him meticulously tending to his flowers, always wearing a smile. One day, I decided to bake some cookies and take them over as a gesture of neighborly goodwill. When I knocked on his door, it took him a while to answer, but when he did, he seemed genuinely pleased. We chatted briefly, and I complimented his garden. He offered to show me around sometime, and I gladly accepted. A few days later, I found myself wandering over to his house after work. He greeted me with a grin and led me into the backyard. The garden was even more stunning up close. Rows of vibrant flowers, perfectly pruned shrubs, and a small, bubbling fountain. As we walked, he told me stories about each plant, how he'd grown some from seeds he'd brought back from his travels. Then he mentioned a particular flower he was especially proud of, a rare species that he said needed special care. He led me to a small greenhouse tucked away in the corner of the yard. When we entered, the air was thick with humidity, and the smell of rich soil filled my lungs. The greenhouse was filled with exotic plants I'd never seen before, all thriving under his meticulous care. But as I wandered deeper into the greenhouse, I noticed something odd. In the back, behind the plants, there was a small door. It was unusual in a place like this. So naturally, I was curious. I asked him about it, but he seemed to hesitate before answering. "Oh, that? It's just a storage room," he said, waving it off. But the way he said it, almost too casually, made my curiosity spike even more. I didn't press the issue, though, not wanting to overstep. A few weeks passed, and I couldn't stop thinking about that door. Mr. Thompson and I had become friendly enough that I felt comfortable asking about it again. So one afternoon, while he was showing me how to prune roses, I casually brought it up. "Mr. Thompson, what's really behind that door in the greenhouse? You seemed a bit hesitant last time I asked." He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, I suppose you're trustworthy. But you have to promise not to tell anyone." I nodded, my heart pounding with anticipation. He led me back into the greenhouse past the rows of plants and stopped in front of the door. He pulled out a small key from his pocket, hesitated for just a second, then unlocked it. What I saw inside completely floored me. The room wasn't a storage space. It was a miniature workshop, filled with woodworking tools, carvings, and unfinished projects. But what really caught my eye were the dozens of intricate wooden boxes lined up on shelves, each one more beautifully crafted than the last. Some had delicate inlays of mother of pearl. Others had swirling patterns burned into the wood. They were breathtaking. "Mr. Thompson, these are amazing. Why do you keep them hidden back here?" He gave me a sad smile. "They're for my wife," he said quietly. Or rather, they were. She passed away a few years ago, and I've been making these for her ever since. He went on to explain that woodworking had been a hobby they'd shared when she was alive, and after she passed, he found solace in creating these boxes. Each one represented a memory of her, a piece of their life together. He didn't sell them or show them to anyone. They were his way of keeping her close. I was speechless. I never would have guessed that behind his quiet exterior was a man so deeply in love with his late wife that he spent years crafting these beautiful tributes to her memory. After that day, I saw Mr. Thompson in a different light. His garden wasn't just a hobby. It was a living tribute to the love he'd lost. Every flower, every plant was carefully tended as if it was a piece of her still with him. We continued to chat over the fence or share a cup of tea now and then, but I never mentioned the workshop again. It was his private sanctuary, and I respected that. But I'll never forget the day I stumbled upon the secret life of my neighbor, hidden away behind a small, unassuming door in a greenhouse. It taught me that you never really know what someone is going through, or the lengths they'll go to keep the memory of a loved one alive.